Hello, my name is Tosca Bruno van Vijwijken and I work with the Transnational NGO Leadership Institute, which is housed in the TNGO initiative here at the Maxwell School. The Leadership Institute was launched by us last year to prepare transnational NGO leaders, and particularly those who currently work at the second tier of responsibility in senior management teams in their organizations and who wish to prepare themselves for top leadership. And I am today undertaking a brief interview with Charlie MacCormack, the, should I say Emeritus?
Emeritus.
Emeritus CEO of Save the Children USA, who is with us as a contributor to the Leadership Institute. Thank you, Charlie, for
Thank you for inviting me
to interview you. This will be helpful for sure. Let's just start off for those people who don't know Save the Children broadly and Save the Children USA. Tell us about the nature and mission.
Well, Save the Children is the world's oldest and largest private children's organization. It was founded in 1919 at the end of World War I in Great Britain, and now works in 125 different countries. Worldwide, Save the Children has about a $1.6 billion a year revenue stream. I was the CEO of the U.S. member of the movement, Save the Children U.S. We raised about $640 million last year and reached about 50 or 60 million children and their parents.
I see. A very significant player in the child development and child rights movement globally.
Exactly.
Tell us, please, how you personally got involved in transnational activism as well as service delivery, and how you over time became a leader.
Well, I certainly didn't start off life with the idea that this was what I would be doing. But I went to Middlebury College in Vermont as an undergraduate, and they have always had a focus on languages and international studies. So I was in this academic environment that was really looking at China and Russia and the Middle East and so on, even a long time ago. And secondly, it was the John Kennedy era. And the time of the founding of the Peace Corps and the Cuban Missile Crisis and the draft and the Vietnam War. So international issues were really impacting our daily life. So that really got me thinking about I would really need to engage with these kinds of issues.
Right. Interesting. And do you want to briefly tell us how your career and your leadership development worked over time? You've had a long and very...
Yes. Well, it's interesting how any of us might become leaders, and what drives us to head in those kinds of directions. But you know, I certainly grew up in a family environment that was very achievement-oriented and did the sports activities and the scouts activities and those kinds of things. And I think that oriented me to roles where you would be working with groups of people to achieve goals together. And I enjoyed it and experienced it really at a young age as far as leadership was concerned. And so then I had this international interest and I had this leadership interest. So I always felt that I would want to be leading an international education or development organization at some point in time. And then I knew there were certain kinds of experiences that were necessary. You had to have a good undergraduate education, and then you had to go to a good graduate program like Maxwell. I happened to go to Columbia University School for International Affairs and then got a doctorate from Columbia. But I do believe that those conceptual tools and those capacities to work with other people and solve problems that you do so well at Maxwell and in this program were really key experiences. And you know, then I was lucky enough to have very worthwhile leadership opportunities very early on. They turned out to be successful, so one thing led to another on the one hand. On the other hand, I would say to younger professionals that by luck, I happen to enjoy networking. And not just focus on my own narrow responsibilities, but to meet other CEOs, to meet CEOs, to meet board members, to meet donors, and so on and so forth. And I think that helped with the job offers and opportunities as CEO of World Learning, as Dean of the Graduate School of the School for International Training, as CEO of Save the Children, that came my way. It wasn't just lightning from the sky, it was all this networking. And I say that particularly to young professionals. Because I have found as a CEO that there seems to be a hesitancy to go and talk to senior executives and so on and so forth, and make clear the good work that you're doing. And if no one knows you're doing it, then you're really lost. So I would say this: get yourself out in front, be on panels, talk to people is very important.
Yeah, for your visibility.
Correct.
And also by talking to CEOs, you get a good understanding of their perspective, which then means when you're being interviewed for leadership positions, you can already show a lot of understanding.
Exactly, and I think CEOs and senior executives really enjoy mentoring younger professionals, because we were all there once. We were very aware we wouldn't have gotten where we got if other people hadn't helped us along the way and guided us along the way, and it's very rewarding to give back that way.
Okay. Now, as you know, in the Leadership Institute, we are framing this first program that we designed and launched last year in terms of leaders making a leap, as we call it, from the second tier of responsibility in international NGOs to top leadership. Could you tell us from your own experience, since you became a top leader quite early in your career, but you have been working at second or third tier in organizations as well. What leadership traits and skills does one need at a top level of leadership in international NGOs that you don't necessarily need at the second tier?
You definitely need to understand that as a CEO, your job is to manage other people and not do the work yourself.
Okay.
So getting the right people on the bus is not 100% of the CEO's job, but a huge part of the CEO's job. And not trying to sit in someone else's seat and take care of their tasks. So that's one huge element. A second is the visioning of where the organization needs to be long term, because it's got to have some coherence, and people look to the senior executive to provide the umbrella vision under which their particular piece is going to take place. And I think only the person in the CEO's role can do that. And if they don't do it, it doesn't get done. So you get drift. So that would be another element. A third is that everyone's watching you. And you really have to be sure that you're walking the talk. I think the absolute death of a CEO is to say one thing and do something else.
Okay.
Because people just aren't going to get on that bandwagon.
Right. Interesting. Coming to your long leadership period in Save the Children that you just left in, September of last year, right? Are there any interesting challenges that Save the Children in the US or Save the Children International as a global movement is facing at this moment in regard to leadership succession and transition in particularly? And how is the organization dealing with those issues?
Well, we all have put a lot of effort into succession and transition. And so I would say every CEO has a real responsibility to make sure that process begins years before the actual event takes place. And I think there are two levels to it. One is about the board, and then the other is about the bench.
Right. Do you want to explain that concept?
It's being sure that there are several experienced people who could do your job.
Okay.
So let me take them separately. The first is, the board is the safety net. If you've got a really strong board and a strong board chair, who really are dedicated to understand what the organization is doing, really key. The Save the Children board chair during this transition is Ann Mulcahy, the former very successful CEO of Xerox Corporation, ran a big global company, turned it around, understand what needs to be done. That's a huge strength. Secondly, my successor spent 11 years as the Chief Operating Officer, very successful, knows all the issues at Save the Children, proved how well she was able to deliver, is trusted by other people. So we didn't have to go, kind of scampering around to find someone to do it. And I think a lot of non-governmental organizations don't necessarily think about succession rigorously, and it really needs to happen.
Yeah. Last question then is, since you contributed...
Just one other point. Dr. Collins, who did The Good to Great, also wrote a seminal piece on, I think it's called the Leadership 5 or something along these lines. But it's really about making sure that the team owns the mission and the strategy and the activities of the organization, that it's not a one-person show. Because what came out in that analysis and the Good to Great analysis is that the executives, that were the visible, give me the spotlight executives, didn't perform well. And those that really put the team out front, said they did it, I'm going to give them the credit, and so on and so forth, were the ones who created successful organizations. So
that's interesting.
So successful executive leadership, is not about the one person show, and so many organizations do well so long as the CEO is there, and then 2 or 3 years later, it's almost destroyed because that executive didn't create the team that could carry it on.
And that comes back to getting the right people on the bus that you said earlier. As Jim Collins would say. So coming to our last question, you contributed yesterday and today in significant ways to the Leadership Institute based on your extensive experience. However, everybody can always learn 1 or 2 new things, right? Even if you have the depth of experience that you have. So is there any surprise, lesson, insight that you take away from participating and listening to participants as they ask you questions and interacted with them?
Well, it wasn't necessarily surprising.
Okay.
But interesting and important. It's been a wonderful opportunity for me to step back and think about strategy and leadership and so on and so forth. Because the reality is, when you're in the battlefield, you're making these decisions on the run.
Right.
And what leadership do I need to do in this situation, or what strategic planning, and the media sitting outside the door, and the budget process is going on, and so on and so forth. So realizing how important it is for senior executives to be able to step back and think in depth about issues, I think is crucial. So I think this Leadership Institute is really, really a wonderful kind of thing for senior executives, because you don't get it in the day-to-day situation. And then secondly, you, in all kinds of ways, realize that the way you did things in this kind of instinctive, intuitive environment aren't sufficient. And that when you get to step back, you inevitably see 4 or 5 things you can do better the next time, or you should be thinking about more.
Right, right.
So that's been great. I feel like I was a participant and beneficiary.
As well as a contributor. Well, you certainly were a significant contributor. I want to thank you for that, and thank you for this interview.
Good, Tosca, and thanks to you and your whole team for a wonderful event and initiative.
You're quite welcome. It was very worth it.